Okay. Hello, guys. Today we have Michael Jakobsson with us. He's a game design professor at MIT, and today he will give us a presentation. And without a further ado, let's begin.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. I thought I'd start with, if it's okay, I would like to share some slides.
Yes.
So let me just pull those up. Um,
Now we can see your screen.
okay, good. So I'm not going to talk for that long because we're going to have a discussion here, but I wanted to give a little bit of background to my latest book and my latest game, and also the MIT Game Lab that probably not everyone watching this is going to be familiar with. So let me start with the lab. So in very broad terms, we teach games. So that involves teaching game design, like in this class, or teaching games from as a sort of cultural studies, objective study, like games in society and games in culture. Um, but then we also study games, of course. So we are all researchers. We're doing the regular things researchers do. We write papers and books and give presentations at seminars and all these kinds of things. These are three of the, I think, the most recent books that have come out of people who work in the lab. And then we also make games ourselves. So we do a lot of collaborations with different parts, different organizations from industry and outside of industry that want help to do something that can only be done through making a game about it, or a game that makes people come together and discuss whatever they want to have discussed and so on. So this is just one example of a prototype that we've been working on recently. It was an assignment from Boston Consulting Group, and we decided that the best way of solving their particular purpose was to make a hybrid game that can be played both physically and online, and with digital components, so that what you do in the physical space gets disseminated into the internet, so people can play with each other, whether they're regardless of which platform they're on. And then we also play games. I think that's important for us, that we, not just because we are very busy, which we are, we're doing all these other things, that we never stop playing games, because I think playing games is the only way of really staying connected to what's happening in games, but also what's happening in gaming communities and in gaming culture, and that also reflects on the gaming industry. So we make sure that we schedule in game playing, try to do it every week, and every now and then we have events and we invite people. This is Cole Worley, who is a famous board game designer. He made a game called Root, but he is here showing another of his games called John Company to students and faculty here at MIT. Okay, so that was just a super brief introduction of the MIT Game Lab. So then I wanted to say a couple of words about my latest book. It's been out for a couple of years now. It's available online as a free download. You can go to MIT Press, look up Playing Oppression, and click around a little bit, and you'll find the open access page where it can be downloaded for free. So this is a book that I wrote together with Professor Mary Flanagan. She is a game historian, a game designer, and a game artist, I guess we could say. So she does all kinds of amazing things. I also want to shout out all the research assistants and students and people in general who helped us play all the games that we played for this book. It's about colonialist themes in games, which means that these games aren't always the most fun games, and they are sometimes very racist and unpleasant to play. So I'm in deep depth to all the people who helped us out with making this book. So why did I make the book? Well, to begin with, I'm from northern Sweden. I moved here to the US about 10 years ago, but I grew up in Sweden in the 70s and 80s. And these sort of whitewashed colonial narratives and racist stereotypes were all everywhere around me. So much so that I didn't even recognize them as being racist. I just thought that this is how the world is. They were in the comic books I read, they were in the toys I played with, they were in the history books we read in school, and they were, of course, in the games we played, even the candy wrappers of the candy we ate. So it was all around me. So in that regard, I think of myself as not critiquing others when we wrote the book. I really sort of thinking of the book as a message to people like me, because a lot of the games that we played were made by white Western men of roughly my age. So I at least claim to understand that. I understand white masculinity, and that's the perspective I come from in this book. If there is a critique of something, that includes kind of a critique to myself. So the first thought I had on the subject was in 2015. So as I said, we always try to play games in the lab, and one week we were playing a game called Lewis and Clark by Cedric Chaboussi, and it's a worker placement board game, kind of a race game where you're playing as the Lewis and Clark expedition and try to get to the end, the Fort Clatsop, as quickly as possible. But what I reacted to in the game was that the Indians, as they're called in the rule book, or the Native Americans, as I prefer to call them, were treated just like any other resource in the game. So you had to use up so and so many Native Americans and this much wood and this many buffalo skins to make a canoe or whatever it is that you were doing. So they weren't really treated like people. They were treated more like a consumable resource. And it sort of struck me as something that I wanted to say something about. So I was like, I'm going to write a blog post about this. But then when I was going to sit down to write the blog post, I started looking for more games, and just in the sort of top 100 on Board Game Geek, a big American website for people who are interested in board gamers, the 100 games that the users of that website has ranked as their favorite games, there were like 10 more games that had this colonialist theme of Western European white men going somewhere else in the world to colonize territory and doing whatever the heck they wanted to do without any consequences or repercussions, and then coming home with money and gems and gold and a reputation. So they were kind of all about white people becoming rich and famous. So I was like, okay, this is more than just a blog post. I think I need to write a paper about this. So I kept seeking out these games and getting my poor students. You know, when you're a research assistant in the MIT Game Lab, you probably came to MIT as a graduate student because you love video games, you know, like you love your Zeldas and your Marios and whatnot. And then I made them play old stinky board games for the 2 years that they were here. But I wrote up a conference version of the paper and went to a conference in Denmark. And the keynote at the conference was by Mary Flanagan. And she was talking about board games from the colonial era. So from basically from the 1600s to the early 1900s. But we were talking about the exact same thing, colonialist themed games, just she was talking about the history and I was talking about contemporary games. So after we had heard each other's presentation, she said, hey, I think we should write a book about this. So I kept finding games and playing them. These are some pictures, just a very small sample of the games that we played for the book. I have to date, I've collected about 1,500 of these games, and we've played about 500 of them. It's not just old games. In fact, there are more and more board games with colonialist themes coming out every year. Now, part of that is because there's more and more board games being released every year. So we're kind of in this second golden age of board gaming right now. I'm sure that has made its impression on Turkey as well. Wherever I go in the world, people are like, yeah, now we have board game cafes and people are really into playing board games and all of that, which I think is great. But yeah, this kind of game is not going anywhere, it seems. It's still very popular, and I think partly it is because a lot of these games still come out of Europe and North America. So that's what the book is about. I know you had a look at one of the chapters of the book, and we can talk more about that later. I'm not going to talk more about the book right now. But instead, I wanted to say also a few words about the board game Promesa. So it's not released in a commercially available version yet. We have made what I think of as a high fidelity prototype that we have been taking to conferences and conventions and different universities and played with students and faculty and so on. But you can't go and buy this game yet. Hopefully, maybe next year, we can be at the point where we can do some kind of crowdfunding campaign to make a bigger production run of the game. So one of the games that we played for the book is called Puerto Rico. I don't know if either of you are familiar with this particular game. It's a German game that among older, maybe especially board gamers, it's very highly regarded. It was ranked as number one, excuse me, number one on this Board Game Geek website for for over a year, I think, as the best board game ever. They would sometimes call it the chess of board games, because there's very little luck involved, so it's a lot about skill when you're playing it. And but what you're doing in the game is you're sort of competing to exploit the main island of Puerto Rico as efficiently as possible. This is set during the Spanish colonial era of Puerto Rico, and notably, there's ships arriving with little brown discs that players can place in their plantations and in their refineries and in their factories. And in the rule book, they say that these are colonists, sort of implying that these are people that are coming from Europe to work in the plantations. But historically, we know that that's not true. After the Spanish almost eradicated completely the indigenous population of Puerto Rico, they started importing slaves from West Africa. So this is really a game about being the most efficient slave owner. And basically you make all these products, tobacco, sugar, and so on, and send it back to Europe, or sell it, and you become rich and famous, as in all of these games. So it's about who becomes the richest and the most famous. So I played it with a couple of students in our graduate program in comparative media studies. One of them, Asiria, is from Puerto Rico, and she has ancestral connections to the Taino people, the indigenous people of Puerto Rico. And she had done her undergrad studies in political science at University of Puerto Rico. So I was very interested in hearing her thoughts about the game. And when we discussed it afterwards, she was like, "Yeah, I'm fine playing this game. I think it's so silly. It's so historically inaccurate. So I'm almost not even getting offended." But also, when we were discussing the current political situation, I realized how little I know about it. So it turned out that they are part of the United States, but they aren't a state. So they doesn't have representation in Congress, and people in Puerto Rico don't even get to vote in the presidential elections in the US, which means that politicians in Washington really don't care about Puerto Rico at all, because they don't even have a vote, right? So that's when we had that discussion, that's where the idea came up that maybe we can make a new Puerto Rico game, one that at least thematically is more interesting than being slave owners. So that's what we did. We went to San Juan, the main city in Puerto Rico, and we organized a workshop where we invited people to come and kind of discuss what do they think are the most important things in their lives right now, rather than things that happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and how can we maybe put game mechanics into these issues. So they came up with a lot of really interesting things, and basically almost all of it, someone pointed out, is connected to colonialism in one way or another. So we took all these ideas, and then we went back to MIT and did a second workshop there. We invited a bunch of professional board game designers and post-colonial researchers and students from Puerto Rico and so on, and took these ideas and started trying to make game prototypes out of them. So one of those prototypes was what later became the game Promesa. So this is a picture from the workshop. At that point, it was this kind of card game where you try to pay off the debt, because there's a debt crisis in Puerto Rico, and they are unable to pay off their debt, which has led to the U.S. government instating a oversight committee, which is called PROMESA, which can basically veto any local decision that the local government makes and say, nope, this is too expensive. You can't build this new water cleaning facility because you have to pay off your debt or whatever it is. So until you have paid off the debt, they're kind of dangling this hope of being debt free, which would take decades and maybe never happen, while the people of Puerto Rico are struggling right here and right now. So when we were there, that was 9 months after the Hurricane Maria, which killed thousands of people, wiped the roofs of most of the buildings on the island, and sort of just tore down all of the infrastructure and created a humanitarian crisis. I'm sure you've seen the pictures. Donald Trump went there and threw some water towels at them, and that was about as much as he cared. So we wanted to make a game about how the debt needs to be removed, but can only be removed through political action. You can't just pay it off, because the island will succumb in the meantime. So this is the board of the game. It was made by a Puerto Rican illustrator and artist called Rosa Colon. She mostly made graphic novels. She had made one about the Hurricane Maria that was in a comic book anthology called Puerto Rico Strong that won a Will Eisner Award here in the US. So she has done all the artwork and illustrations for the game, and it's absolutely beautiful. And this is what the game looks like. And when you start out the game, we put this silicone, we call it a tarp. So that's inspired by these FEMA tarps that were on most buildings' roofs after the hurricane, because the roofs had blown off. So they didn't even have roofs on the buildings. And last time I was there, earlier this year, I still saw some of these FEMA tarps up. So there's still buildings that lack roofs. There's still traffic lights that don't work in central San Juan. There's still all these infrastructure things that haven't been completely rebuilt, because since then, we've also had another hurricane, we had a tsunami, we had an earthquake, and because of global warming, these things aren't just gonna go away. They're gonna keep happening, and Puerto Rico has no ability to build up a resilience against it because of the debt. So when you play the game, you start out with a lot of these black rocks on the tarp in the middle of the island. And then the goal of the game is to push that tarp off the island so that it can sail home to Washington, D.C., where it belongs. The way you do it is you have to build up the infrastructure, and you have to build up the education, which means you have to actually make investments, which increases the depth. That's why we're seeing some colored gems on top of the rocks there as well, which makes it harder and harder to push the tarp in order to win the game towards the end of the game. And when we play these games, or when our students play them, it's very they get very nervous. It's anxiety provoking. Everything you do in the game, you have to do a skill test. So when you make an investment, you also have to drop a gem onto the tarp without anything falling off. And when you push the tarp, also gems can't fall off. So what we tried to do with that mechanic was to make people who play the game feel a little bit of the struggle that the people of Puerto Rico are feeling because of the situation they are in. So it's to maybe foreshadow a little bit our discussion here. It's one way of how we try to make a game mechanic and a gameplay experience that more reflects those who are underprivileged by the powers that are and the colonialist histories, and something about resistance and struggle represented in board game mechanics rather than just becoming more and more rich and more famous. Okay, so that was all I wanted to talk about to start us off here. And I'm going to stop presenting. And now I'm open to questions.
Yes, thank you, sir. It affected me a lot, your presentation. And before hearing this, I was going to ask you the question of, do you think playing board games can make the world a better place? But now I have the answer that yes, they can.
So, but I can say some more about that, because I don't really think that this game or any other game can solve the debt crisis in Puerto Rico. We just don't have that kind of impact, that kind of power. But I still think that making this kind of game is important. And I'll just mention a few ways that I think it matters. So I've been playing this game for playtesting purposes with my students here for several years. And most recently, I had an undergrad student from Puerto Rico in my class. And when we had played the game, he came up to me afterwards and said, thank you so much for making this game. I felt so proud playing this game with my classmates, because I've never seen my own home in a game, whether it's a video game or a board game before. And I could even point to where I'm from on the map and say, like, this is where I grew up. And he said, this place is never on Puerto Rico maps, even, because Puerto Rico maps are always made for tourists. And he's from a place sort of in the middle of the island with just a lot of residential buildings. So tourists never come there, so they don't even put it on the map. But for him, it's important because it's his home, right? So he said, I'm so happy that it was on the board and that San Juan was so small, because San Juan is where all the cruise ships stop. There's a whole part of the city that is just tourist restaurants and hotels, and they're all owned by US interests from off the island. So all the money that tourists spend in Puerto Rico goes back to the States. It never stays there. So it's a little bit of a critique of the idea of, well, the way to save Puerto Rico is through tourism, but that's not really going to help. What happens with tourism is that people who have lived in San Juan their whole lives get displaced because Marriott or some other hotel chain decides to build another luxury hotel. So it actually has a negative effect on the people who live
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And now I'm going to move on with questions from our question pool. As you know, your projects often involve interdisciplinary collaboration, and I wonder, how does working with scholars, artists, or activists change your design choices compared to working solely within the game industry? You know, you mentioned that you actually been to Puerto Rico and listened to local people and then created your mechanics, and that was impressive, but I wanted to hear more about this.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's a good question. So uh, over the years, what I think what the Game Lab has become experts at more than anything else is creative, these spaces for uh, playful and creative activities. So, and we approach it very differently. When we work with the games industry, uh, we use game design as our shared language. So if we want to talk about um, inclusivity or something like that, we don't give them academic papers to read about with statistics and things like that. Instead, uh, we conceptualize game ideas with them where we consciously move away from the kind of stereotypes that we see reproduced over and over again in the video game industry, for instance. So we're sort of creating the rules of the design process. So that's, you know, not allowed. You have to have heroes that are different in some way, that break those norms, for instance. Um, but there we know that they are even better than us at design. So we can, uh, they feel included, and they feel like their expertise is being seen when we're doing design activities together. When we work with organizations like, I don't know, the World Health Foundation, or the Red Cross or something like that, then we instead try to let their expertise shine by letting them inform us, instead of us suggesting anything. What could a game be about? So we try to have them express themselves, and then just gently push that into, how can that be a mechanic in a game? What kind of characters in a game could we have if we want to express this need, like the lack of clean water in this area, or whatever, if they're trying to make a game to create awareness about some kind of humanitarian disaster or something like that. So I think it's always looking to the expertise that the collaborator has, and let them use that in the process. So that's something that for me comes from, before I was in game studies, I was in design studies and was learning participatory design. So the idea there is that if you want to make good tools for the people who are working in an organization, like at the factory floor or something, you can't come and use your fancy design terms, and you can't just come in and talk to the boss and ask what they want. You have to go on the factory floor and work with the workers there and see what expertise they have, and learn from participating with them. And you have to be good at making like easy to understand, like prototypes and mock-ups and things like that, that they can kind of play with together with you, in order to create change that actually benefits the skilled workers. So that's the kind of foundation that I have with me when I came into working with game industry, and working with other people who want us to make games with them.
Yeah, and I think players have a special, some kind of instinct that they can understand why we put a mechanic or something in the game. Like they can see the afterwards, if we did it for a good purpose or if we just did it to like make it happen
Hmm.
immediately. And designing games with as you said, factory workers and explaining them and collaborating, I guess it enriches the experience we try to deliver.
Right. To to add to that, I think we all have experiences of playing. Even when I get into a group where people say, "Well, I don't play games. I don't know. I'm scared." Uh, I do an exercise with them that I call "people in my life through play." So basically, people just have to stand up in front of the others and talk about people that are important to them in their life. But every time they mention a person, they have to mention a play activity that they have done together with that person or that makes them think of that person. Uh, and they can always do it. It's like, yeah, when I was small and my uh, uh, grandma was cleaning, she let me ride on the vacuum cleaner or something like that. She was pulling me around. And that is play, right? It's not, Call of Duty exactly, but it is the same kind of fundamental instinct that I think we all have, not just humans, but even animals, to play. So I think that that's a shared grounding that we can always pull from. So always, whenever we do some kind of creativity workshop with a startup or incubator or something like that, we always play a game with them. We always try to get them in that sort of playful mindset because we think that opens up for creativity and innovation and all those kind of things that they ask for from us.
I don't know if I'm right, but I think the thing that sparkles that creativity is the magic circle we enter when we decide consciously to play. When we decide with our free will to play, with others, I guess then we can feel more free to express, to make something creative, or find different ways and look from different aspects.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have been trying to, we have a white paper coming out, I think later this fall, where we have tried to delve a little bit more into that. Basically, just pull apart what you were just saying and what are the different aspects of that. And one that I think is important is that we have less of a fear of failure when we're playing games. So there's this saying that I've been trying to figure out where it comes from, but it's getting attributed to so many different people, so I don't think anyone knows. But the saying is, the mask doesn't hide, it reveals. So I think play can act as a mask when we sort of take on a role. We're not quite ourselves, and then we can do fail or look silly or whatever, and it bothers us less. So the example I always use is that at some point in my life, I started feeling silly when I was dancing. I was like, I'm too old for this. Uh, so I stopped dancing. But whenever someone boots up a dance game, I'll dance like nobody's watching. And the only difference is really that there's like a score counter or something in the corner. But suddenly I don't feel embarrassed and I just go for it. And I also very competitive. So I really have to do all the moves to try to get the high score. So yeah, I think that's one of those kind of almost magical properties of play. Another one that I was thinking of is that it makes us focus our attention, because when you're playing a game or some kind of doing some kind of competitive activity, you have to focus on it, or you're gonna, lose, or get, lose a life or whatever. So that kind of natural attention creation, when we do that with teams, everybody goes from, I'm a little bit checking in on what's happening with the kids at home, or trying to see where I'm going to have dinner, and everybody's on their phone or wishes they were, and sort of not quite paying attention. And then I say, okay, we're going to play a game, and everybody, you have some cards in your hands, and you have to play the card when you think it's your turn or whatever. Suddenly everybody is 100% focused on the activity. And if you can keep them there, then I think whatever exercise you're doing afterwards is going to go a lot better than if you just did the exercise right away. I've started doing it with my students too, by the way. It's just, you don't have to ask anyone to put away their phone or something like that. If you're saying we're going to play a game, they're like, "What? Let's do this. I'm here." So I think that attention thing is big. I think there are other things as well, but yeah, I think those are big ones.
Yeah, to get to know someone rather than talking for a lifetime, play a board game 1 hour and you'll know better.
Yes, I think that's a good one as well, because there's just understanding each other on a different plane. There's something about whether we're playing, like first-person shooters online, or we're playing chess or whatever. I feel like I understand the people I play against and with in a way that part of them I couldn't understand in any other way. Then there's, of course, other things that you get to know people from talking to them, and hanging out and having dinners together and whatnot. But that kind of, there's some aspect of, I know how this person thinks, and you almost have these, like, he thinks I'm going to do that, so I'm going to do this, but then he knows that, so I'm actually going to do what he thought I was going to do, because that's going to throw him off. That kind of understanding of each other, I think, makes you feel like you have a connection with the person.
Yes, I completely agree, and I'm moving on with my next question. Many young designers in our community are interested in creating games with political or social messages. And what are some conceptual common pitfalls they should avoid when trying to be serious or meaningful?
So first of all, I am seeing this kind of change. There's like bubbling up a lot of new types of games that are more sort of critical of different power structures that young people are trapped under, and I think that is super interesting. I think one pitfall, maybe not so much from young indie game designers, but more maybe from educators who go like, oh, so kids play games now, we have to make games to make them learn these things, is that they forget that games have to be fun first. So I think you can have any kind of amazing messaging in a game, but if it isn't capturing the player, if it isn't fun or at least interesting to play, people aren't going to care, and it's not going to have any impact on anything. I think when we made Promesa, I'm really into like heavier political board games that are kind of hard to learn and take a long time to play, and maybe you have to play several times before you really get all the mechanics and get good at it and all of that. But so that was maybe where we started with the board game. but we realized that the more we play tested it, that it's really these skill tests, the sort of putting on gems or pushing the tarp, that those are the big emotional moments in the game. When we look at the people who are playing, that is where the experience kind of spikes. So that's where we started taking away as much as possible of all the other things. And it was, as I said, it started as a card game. There are no cards anymore in the game at all. It's all about using these gems and manipulating the state of the board. So I think it's important to not try to make games for yourself, make games for an audience, and make sure that you actually test on that audience and see that it works, and really see that you get honest feedback, and not just like, if you're the teacher in a class, ask students afterwards what they think, because they're probably going to say it was okay, even if they didn't like it, because you're the teacher and whatnot. But yeah, I think we have certain expectations when we play games, or being sucked into it and really being engaged with it. And if the game doesn't do that, then yeah, it doesn't really work as a game.
Yeah, and while designing Promesa, did you have, like, before the design part, did you have the clear picture in your mind of the core essence experience you want to deliver? Because I feel like while designing the game, you wanted player to feel the struggle that the local people of Puerto Rico has, and I feel like you have built the entire mechanics and the games, and made them support that core essence of feeling.
Right. Yes. So that was where we started. But the way we wanted them to feel that initially was what I call a spinning plates mechanic. I don't know if you've seen it. It used to be popular kind of circus act or whatever, where someone is trying to keep porcelain plates spinning on wooden sticks, and they have to run back and forth to re-spin the sticks so the plates don't come falling down. So we thought that if we're going to have this game where you're playing cards to the different things that can't run out of resources, whether it's things like clean water and medicine and food, but at the same time you want to build up infrastructure and education, and you have to pay off the loan, and you're just never going to have enough cards to do it all. So that's how you were going to feel that frustration, which we thought was like, it's a fun kind of frustration. It's like an engaging frustration, so you can actually have fun playing the game and come away feeling a little bit something of that. But that the cards went away completely, so that went away completely, but the frustration was still there, but in a completely different way. Now it was about trying to balance those gems without anything falling off, which was an even stronger emotion. So that's why we put it in there. But yeah, so much changed during the development of the game. The core idea stayed the same, but we got so much input also because we were showing it in Puerto Rico, and people started to tell us about their own experiences and things like that. So it was very much influenced along the way by the people who were playtesting.
Yes, thank you for your answers. And then I'm moving on with my next question. Um, in your analysis, how do mechanics, not just narrative, reinforce colonial ideologies? Can you give examples where even abstract systems convey oppressive worldviews?
Yeah, so I think that the argument we make in the book that when we keep playing these characters that are always white men and they're always going on adventures, having a lot of fun and coming back rich and famous, that sort of that enforces a worldview that is, you know, pretty rotten, and that's not good. But the harder argument, I think, which we also make in the book, is that this worldview is embedded in the mechanics themselves as well. So the way I try to explain it is that there is a category of board games and video games called 4X games, and it stands for explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. It comes from war gamers who started making space games. This is in the 60s, 70s, so before computer games. So they were making them as board games, and then they spread to other themes like civilizations, for instance, in Civilization and so on. But these games are mechanically resting on the four pillars of Western colonialism. That's exactly how colonialism played out. It started with exploration, and then the European nations started expanding themselves and claiming colonies, and then they started exploiting those colonies. So they're draining out different parts of the world from their natural resources, including the people who live there. And then when they built each other up, they start fighting each other to become, you know, the top ruler of all the empires. So that is not a fluke. That is actually in the games because these game designers had the colonialist mindset, just like I did, from what we saw in the movies and the books we read and what we heard in school and so on. So I think I'm not saying that you can't use an extermination mechanic, like basically fighting wars, and it's not being anti-colonialist, because you can. But always when we're dealing with these mechanics, there is a risk that we intentionally or unintentionally recreate popular media that reinforces this kind of mindset, that this is how the world has to be. It's only the you know, might makes right. The strongest can make whatever rules and laws they want. There is an internal war. We're never gonna stop having wars. So you have to feed your army through building up an empire so that your army will be stronger than everybody else's army. All these kinds of mindsets that I think very much exist here in the US, for instance, to this day, are built on these colonialist ideologies. So I think that it is super interesting and exciting when game designers start looking for mechanics outside of these tropes of domination and exploitation.
Thank you. Now, Mehmet, you can ask the question also.
Yeah, I have a question about video games and mythology. I really like mythology and I enjoy using mythological themes in my games. And sometimes I'm also interested in myths from other cultures and want to make something based on them. But I know that games are not just for fun, they are also a cultural space of power. So, what should a game designer do to handle issues of cultural ownership and representation in a respectful way when working with myths from the other cultures?
Right. That's one of the questions that I think about a lot. I understand that I'm in a position of extreme privilege because I can apply for money like we did for Promesa, actually go to Puerto Rico, arrange workshops, and hire. So Rosa, who made the illustrations, she was a visiting artist here for 3 months while she was making her art. That all costs a lot of resources. And as a young independent game designers, there's absolutely no way that you can do that. I think cultural engagement is always always has to be part of it, but you have to figure out what kind of cultural engagement can I do within my resources. So we see in the games that we write about in the book, we often see Western designers and Western illustrators clearly only having spent like 15 minutes on Wikipedia looking things up before they make a game about some like Eastern mythology or something like that. And when the game comes out, people from that part of the world are always very disappointed. Like, well, they made a game about Japan, samurais in Japan, but they got everything wrong. The armor he's wearing is a mix of different eras, and the samurai would never do what you do in the game, and all those kinds of things. So as students in higher education, at least you have the power to learn. So I say use it, and also with the communities that exist on the internet, we can actually engage with people from whatever part of the world that we are trying to make a game about, and you can even find people who are willing to collaborate for free on giving you sources of information and inspiration so that you can really engage with the theme that you want to make a game about. And already doing that, I think, counts for a lot.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And now I am moving on with my next question. You and the co-author of the book talk about casting players into certain roles. And I wonder, how can designers intentionally disrupt the default white Western male ideal player archetype without falling into tokenism or performative inclusion?
Right. So that's some of the work that we've been doing with people from the games industry. I've run workshops called Recasting the Player. And basically, what I've been trying to do is make game developers, maybe especially those who decide on narrative and characters and things like that, but also those who put game mechanics to the narratives and to the characters, think more about their own lives, their own context of living. So I do one exercise where everybody has to name a skill that they have and an attribute that they have. So maybe they are nearsighted, but they can interpret Morse code or whatever. That happens to be me. And then we just throw all those in a hat, and then we mix it around, and then pull a few for each group, and then they have to do character creation based on those skills and abilities. So that's a natural way of representing ourselves and reality more than sort of taking these pre-made archetypes from popular media, which tend to have their roots in the European colonial era. That's really where we started making games that had characters, that had stories. And that's where we started writing these um, uh, uh, books about people going on adventures. And really, we have since then just kept reusing those narratives and those archetypes and stereotypes, first in books, then in movies, then in TV shows, and now in video games. They're just keep being the same. So I think we need to create new heroes. We need to create new villains, and I think we should seed our minds with reality, things that matter to us, rather than these old dusty stereotypes.
Thanks for the answer. And my next question: in Sid Meier's civilization, colonization and expansion are a rewarded strategy in the game mechanics. What historical narrative does the unknownly encourage the player to replay?
Right. So, um, first of all, I like Civilization. I'm not saying don't play these games. I think most of the games that I've been critiquing at one point or another, I can also see qualities in. So I don't want to be that guy who goes like, "Oh, this is bad." This is. But when it comes to Civilization, uh, sometimes I hear scholars saying, "Well, Civilization kind of breaks the mold because you can have the Aztec Empire being the most powerful in the world, or you can have Gandhi developed the nuclear bomb or something like that. So you're playing with history in an interesting way, and sure, that is true, but I still feel like we're still using the same mechanics of domination and internal war and things like that. So anything that takes this kind of grand perspective on culture, world culture, and doesn't trap it into those fixings of you have to fight wars to become more powerful, or you have to claim land so that you can feed your armies. Whatever that sort of takes other kinds of approaches to success and progress is, to me, more interesting, especially from a kind of an environmental and sustainability perspective. That kind of success narrative worked for a while, but what we're seeing now is that it's all collapsing. And what a lot of game designers do is like, oh, now we're just displace humanity into space and go ruin some other planet or whatever. But that to me seems unrealistic and sad. I don't want to leave Earth. So I feel like we should be able to create mechanics that does the same kind of very interesting and engaging gameplay that games like Civ has, but maybe that subverts the mechanics and still creates that kind of experience. I can't be more specific than that because I think that's up to whoever I'm talking to out there to come up with their own solutions to. I think there's a lot of different solutions, and I'm very sort of curious to see them.
Yeah, thank you. And in Eva Virtassen's article about Sid Meier's civilization, Both of tabletop and civilization games you analyzed, the player is systematically cast as a colonial actor. But is this ideological casting solely determined by the game narrative, or do the mechanics and win conditions also incentivize the player's colonial behavior? If so, what would a game design that would break this cycle look like?
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, first part, yes, I think, as I said, if we're making the Aztecs being like a global empire, then we are just making the Aztecs into colonizers in our own image, and that's not at all necessarily what would have happened if European colonization hadn't played out the way it did with the extermination of the Aztec people. Just for instance, um, but to the second part, I just don't have an easy answer to that question. I have a couple of board games here that I've been playing recently. These are both from this year. I played this one yesterday. It's called Kartini. It's by Sharia Ayunandini, and she's from Indonesia. She works in Singapore now. She's an academic, and this game is about the role that fighting for women's education in Indonesia had on Indonesia's decolonization and liberation from the Netherlands that had Indonesia as its colony at one point. So in this game, you're basically fighting for women to get an education, and then it's kind of a worker placement game where once a woman has become educated, she can become a teacher, or she can become a warrior, or she can become a benefactor. So it just shows in a very culturally engaged way how education can lead to liberation. So it's a fight against colonialism, but not really that much with weapons. You know, the weaponized fight is part of it, but it's really you're fighting with the power of knowledge or education, which I love that game. I just played it. I just want to show one more example. I played this the other week. This is called Winter Rabbit. And this designer, Will Thompson, he has even sort of written about how he developed a model of the 4 C's that replaces the 4 X's of 4X games. So this is about a game where you are gathering resources and you're trying to make it through the winter and all these kinds of things, and you're competing with each other. So competition is still part of it, but it doesn't mean like you're trying to eradicate each other. You're just more trying to compete to be as good as you can at making your village have as much resources so that they can survive through the winter. But also an interesting aspect about this game is that you can't just collect infinite resources the way you often do in the colonialist games, because if you have too much resources, they're either going to rot or they're going to take up too much space if you need to move your village to another place. So if you don't have enough storage or you don't have enough people to transport all of this, so it is this resource game where it's sort of you have to have the right resources at the right time, which I think is game mechanically really interesting. It's not how I'm used to thinking. I'm used to thinking like more is always better. So it also feels fresh, and I really enjoyed that game. But those are just two small examples. I think it's really different people from different cultures are going to come up with different ideas, and I think a big part of this is I'm trying to amplify the voices of those who have something interesting to say, those who are making interesting games that don't fall into these traps.
Yeah, and I believe your work matters, it's really valuable and precious. And now I'm moving on with my next question.
So, by the way,
Uh-huh.
I have to leave very soon. I'm sorry.
Okay,
So maybe we can do one more question or something like that.
okay. Last question then. In our university, Istanbul Technical University, we have game interaction technologies master's program, and we design games there also. And you are a member of MIT and one of the world's most prestigious research institutions. And do you think institutions like MIT are a realistic target for researchers coming from countries like Turkey, where academic production is conducted with limited resources? And is the path to these institutions solely determined by the number of publications, or there are other qualities you are seeking for?
Right. So I definitely have Turkish colleagues, and we've had Turkish students. A number of them in our master's program. Our master's program is currently on hold, unfortunately, but it's definitely possible. And I think the way we are thinking about when we select our students is that we also want to have a cultural diversity among the students, and I think it's important to have people who are coming from all parts of the world being part in, because a lot of the education that happens here doesn't happen just from instructor to student, but also between students and between instructors. However, the other question, what the specific requirements are, it differs so much between different parts of MIT. I am part of the School of Social Sciences and Humanities, and we evaluate people, students and people we hire very differently than, let's say, the computer science and electrical engineering are doing. So I can't really give a specific answer to that, but I can definitely say that what I like about MIT is that it does have a very diverse and broad representation of researchers and students from all over the world. What I don't like about MIT is that we are in the United States, and currently things are really bad here, and it's affected our students. Some of them, I also teach at Harvard, and they have been hit even harder with some international students, basically, or international researchers simply not being allowed into the country, or being having had their projects and research funding taken away, and so on. So it's pretty grim right here, right now. But I definitely think that it's not an unrealistic goal for people from the ITU to have.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. We appreciated the opportunity. And to close, would you like to add something or suggest to the game design students? It can be a book or any general suggestion you want.
Well, I already gave, I think, two board game recommendations. So I think that can be my recommendations. Even if you're mostly focused on video games, I think if you can find one of these games and try them out, you will definitely have a good time. I would say Winter Rabbit is a little lighter. Cartini is a pretty complex game. It's maybe for people who play board games more regularly, but I found them both to be super exciting.
Yeah. Thank you again, sir, one more time. We appreciate it. Thank you for accepting and delivering a speech. Guys, today we had Sir Mr. Mikael Jakobsson with us. And stay tuned for more. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.